In this video, we're going to talk about how to get featured on almost any podcast at massive scale. Now, within our 5 phases of a marketing campaign, this falls under phase 4, promotion. And of course, if you want to learn more about our 5 phases, go to the blueprint.training. I'm really hot on podcasts right now for a number of reasons. And this is a quote from the New York Times where it says, nearly 1 out of 3 people listen to at least one podcast every month. Last year, it was more like 1 in 4. And I have been featured on dozens, almost hundreds of podcasts over the last few years, and they're great for PR, getting exposure organically, spreading your message. They're also a great platform to advertise on. There's incredible retention from ad spend on podcasts. And from an SEO point of view, they are a great source of high quality links. And if you do this right, you can scale this out and build a very effective PR and link building campaign in one swoop. So let's talk about how to build podcast outreach into your marketing practice. So podcasts have really become like the new radio shows, except, especially from our point of view, they're much easier to get an appearance on. If you follow the system that I'm going to give you in this video, you can crush it. However, podcasts are not a great tactic for everyone. Podcasts have always been great for B2B promotions. There are hundreds of podcasts about marketing, business, tech, entrepreneurship, and even more niche within that for things like finance, law, or even being a finance or law specialist and getting on a podcast about entrepreneurship or vice versa, which we'll talk about in this webinar. But honestly, also lifestyle, B2C podcasts about fashion, culture, sneakers, they're super hot right now. My girlfriend actually listens to a ton of podcasts that have humongous reach, and they're open for anyone to pitch for inclusion. The key here, though, is scaling the outreach. So getting on one podcast, unless it's huge like Tim Ferriss's podcast, won't really move the needle for PR or for links. You need to build a system to land a ton of podcasts in order to get everywhere and really build a solid link building and PR campaign all in one. So let's break down the process for how to do so. First and foremost, you got to build a strategy. You got to build the right targets. You got to build the right pitches. You can see the little tag there for local. That just means we perform this in-house in our office. And after we do that, we move into what we call the prospecting stage. And you can see the tag here is where we offshore. So we have a team over in the Philippines who are what we call link prospectors. Their only job for us is to go out and find these different opportunities, in this case, podcast opportunities, and record them into a spreadsheet for us to then contact. After those opportunities are found, we go through and we clean and organize the opportunities. Because these are a PR pitch, we have to really go through and make sure that we've got the right podcast prospected for. We don't want to annoy people. We don't want to burn bridges. We want to make sure the pitches that we send are going to be received properly. So that's why we go through locally and clean and organize the big list. After that, we have another team in the Philippines who handles outreach for us. Basically just means they send email pitches. We use a platform called Pitchbox, which I'll show you. But after we organize the opportunities, we pitch them at scale. And then we have a project management process, how we're organizing and staying on top of these and following up, which we also do locally or offshore in our office, depending. And then, of course, following and building this cycle into a wheelhouse to land these podcasts consistently. Let's talk about the strategy. It's essentially a hacked PR campaign. In order to get featured on a podcast, you have to be interesting. And you need to know what interesting means for different industries. If you're doing this on behalf of clients, for example, the difference between pitching a podcast for an attorney versus a marketing agency versus an e-commerce store. You have to understand what interesting is in each one of those niches, and you have to formulate a pitch to do so. So interesting can come in a number of ways. Number one is having clout. Are you or your client well known? Do you have a big social following? Are you important in certain circles, like the attorney space? Are you funny? And you can see here my little influencer taking a nice selfie over here. She's got clout. She can get featured. But if you don't have clout, do you have a story to tell? This is probably the most common one and also the most underutilized PR tactic. Everyone has a story. Have you overcome something crazy in life to get where you are, or has your client? Have you built a business against all odds? What is your story, and can you formulate that into a pitch that's interesting to different podcasts for you to come on and talk about it and tell their audience? This has been a core principle of PR for decades now, and it's still highly underutilized. You are an interesting person if you can tell the story the right way. Are you a verified expert in a field? Are you able to go very deep on a topic? Perfect example of this is I was on a flight the other day and I was listening to Tim Ferriss's podcast, and he had a finance guy on there, and he traditionally talks about entrepreneurial stuff, but the finance guy was able to come on and talk and go really deep on investing tactics for entrepreneurs. So as a finance person, he was able to get featured on an entrepreneurial podcast, still talking about what he wants, but becoming a verified expert, but pitching himself as a verified expert for finance for entrepreneurs, which is very smart. Or do you have a unique point of view to present? And this usually comes from data. So have you or your company done some interesting research stuff, and can you present them to an audience? I was actually just watching this documentary on Netflix about flat earth people. And this guy brought together a bunch of different data about flight paths. And he was able to make an argument that because of these flight paths, the earth is flat. And that's a grossly oversimplified version of it. But because of that, he was then featured on tons of podcasts, tons of interviews because of that data that he put together. So can you come up with data to present it into an interesting story to tell a podcast audience? With that being said, after we identify what our angle is, we're going to have to write a pitch or a series of different pitches. So let's talk about this. I like to write the pitches up front because by knowing the value that we add, we can streamline the prospecting and the outreach. It will tell us the exact type of podcast that we need to target. So let's write a pitch here. The first thing I like to do is start out by listing out accolades or pieces of interest, essentially a long form bio to flesh out all possible pitch angles. Next, I like to build a platform based on what we can offer. This is exactly what speakers do. They build what's called a platform and they pitch that for all these different speaking engagements across the country, and then they go on tour speaking about it. So what you need to do is you need to look over your data, look over your accolades, and figure out what your platform could be. Is it an interesting piece of data? Is it the story of how you built your company? Is it the story of how you used to live in your car and then you made your first dollar online? That's your platform. So we want to look for ways to build these mini platforms based on bio. And when we're writing the pitch, we want to get to the point and do the work for them. Just get right into it. These long form pitches, they're no good. People are busy. In the first 2 sentences, you should tell people who you are and why you're contacting them. And then the third sentence, it should be what it is that you can do for them. So in the sense of pitching podcasts, it's basically formulating the story for the podcast for them. You'll probably need multiple pitches with different angles. So as I said about the finance guy who was on Tim Ferriss's podcast, let's say that you have a financial management company. You might write a pitch that's specifically for finance podcasts. And with that, you really want to prove yourself as an expert in the field or a unique point of view that you can share with people who already know finance. On the contrary, you can also get featured on a ton of other different types of podcasts by writing a pitch that positions you as a niche expert for those podcasts. So again, if you're in finance, you could go and prospect for a bunch of finance podcasts, write a pitch to be included on finance podcasts. Then after that, you can go prospect for a bunch of entrepreneurial podcasts and write a pitch that talks about, again, financial tips for entrepreneurs. And you can take that and scale that out across as many niches as you can come up with. So let's look at a pitch that I wrote for you guys, and please don't use this. This is literally the pitch that I use. It works really well. Please rewrite it. Otherwise, you're gonna look like an ass because literally tens of thousands of people are gonna see this video and sending this pitch. So just modify it, por favor. So it starts by saying, my name is Ryan Stewart. This is who I am, and I'm reaching out about your podcast. I'd love to be a guest in your show. Who I am, why I'm reaching out. And then it gets into the value in the pitch. I'm an entrepreneur. Past 2 years, I've sold 2 businesses. I would love to tell your audience about that story. Again, that's the pitch right there, saying I can come on your podcast and I can tell them a story about how I sold 2 businesses. And then I just go and I list out a bunch of accolades for them to verify, and I link out to my personal site, which is essentially an online resume for them to get more details. So you can see here how I incorporated all these 4 bullet points into a very simple and succinct pitch that works really, really well. So after we've done that, then we can start building out the prospecting keywords. And I like to use a site called listennotes.com. It is a podcast search engine. It's amazing. And I want to use an example here of how I would use the site for myself, right? So I'm a marketer. I'm also an entrepreneur. I've got a few businesses. These are the keywords that I would use to prospect for. So for example, business, entrepreneurship, marketing, and then sub niches within marketing like SEO, e-commerce, Facebook advertising. I would use these prospecting keywords to go into Listen Notes and find podcasts that I can record and then pitch. So what about for something different? What if you own an online store that sells sneakers, right? What are the prospecting keywords that you could use there? Still, things like entrepreneurship. You can talk about the business, how you built it, how you find the products, all sorts of different things. You could then find other podcasts about sneakers, about fashion. You could pitch those with a different angle, which we just talked about. So now that we have the strategy, we can talk about finding the opportunities. And this is a very manual process. Again, we have a team over in the Philippines. I hired them all off of Upwork.com, pay them anywhere from $3 to $6 an hour. And their only job is to find podcast opportunities and record them in a spreadsheet. And I just literally give them access to the blueprint, my training platform. They watch the videos and they go and do it. I don't have to do anything. Specifically, we build a scratch sheet that we use to prospect. And it's simply just a place where they can record these different things into a Google Sheets file where we can then check the work afterwards. So they're simply going to take those prospecting keywords, business, entrepreneurship, SEO that I just talked about, and they're going to go through listennotes.com and they're going to record the different podcasts. These do, however, require an additional level of review. So when we do outreach for other things like guest posting or influencers, we don't cross-check the work that the prospectors do. But because we have to pitch this from somebody's name, either for our clients at our agency or for myself, I don't want to just spam email people. So I really want to make sure that these are really perfect opportunities. So there's another step after this that we'll talk about where we go through and we clean the opportunities. So we just use the scratch file, and then after we clean them, we migrate them into our true project management tracking file, which I'll show you in a second. So I just want to show you real quick how easy it is to prospect. All we do is we send them to listennotes.com. They type in the prospecting keyword up here, and then they just go through these individual shows. They read about the podcast to see if it's a good fit, and if it is, then they'll record it into our spreadsheet. They will visit their website, record that link, and they will grab their email from here. Everything is done for you. It's super easy. They're just really just migrating data into a spreadsheet. And then they're done. They just go through all these prospecting keywords. They build us a list, and then we move on to cleaning them. So the same person that develops a strategy, we have go through and clean all the opportunities one by one. And again, this is very simple. This is a screenshot from our prospecting file here. They just go through line by line and just make sure that the people would actually be receptive to wanting to hear from us and we're not annoying them. I like to remove anyone that's too big. For example, Gary Vee. And I put this in with hesitation because, you never know. Sometimes you want to shoot your shot. You might get on Gary's show. You have to have some level of self-awareness to understand if you can actually get on that podcast or not. And if no, then just save it for another time. Get on 20 podcasts first, and then you can pitch your inclusion on past podcasts to bigger podcasts for you to come on. You obviously want to remove anyone that doesn't do interviews on their show. We don't want to contact people to come on to interview us if they don't actually interview people. And people that just wouldn't be receptive to the pitch. So that usually just means that people that are not within the niche that we prospected for. And this should take about an hour to go through 50 or so prospects. It's manual labor, but it's well worth it. Your success rate will go way up if you take this extra step. After we do that, we just migrate the approved ones from the scratch file into our link outreach file, into the contacts tab. And this is really cool too, because the semi-automated file that once we drop the links in here will tell us if we've contacted them in the past or if we've been live on the past. So again, when we're doing this at massive scale, we're talking about having thousands of websites in here. We don't want to contact the same website that we've already contacted in the past and reintroduce ourselves. This file helps us to track and manage mass outreach campaigns, which we do at the agency for hundreds of clients, sending tens of thousands of pitches a month. Helps us stay on track of things, stay organized, and maintain that brand equity to not annoy people and make sure that we're doing cold outreach the right way. It's super important. So after we've gone through, cleaned those prospects and migrated them into our project management file, start to send the email. Now, I like to use Pitchbox. You can go one by one using Gmail and canned responses if you want, but I highly suggest use Pitchbox. It's an automation platform where when you're sending tens of thousands of emails a month, it's really your only option. What you want to do is make sure that you're matching up your pitch type based on the opportunity list. So when I talked about having different pitches for different niches, going back to that attorney example, going back to that finance example, you want to make sure that you're sending your finance pitch to your finance prospected podcast. You want to make sure that you're sending your finance entrepreneurial pitch to the entrepreneurial podcast. And you can do that simply by just creating different campaigns in Pitchbox and uploading different pitches. And really, you should be sending these pitches from an email that's attached to your domain, i.e. not a Gmail, because there needs to be that extra level of trust and credibility coming from a verified domain, not just coming from a random Gmail. So using Pitchbox is really easy. All you got to do is, since we have the prospects already found, we just upload them via CSV. We drop the pitch in that we wrote, and Pitchbox has these little brackets here that will pull through and spin through name to personalize it for us. So each one of these emails going out looks like it's coming from a handwritten email from you. And then my favorite part about Pitchbox is the ability to add auto follow-up emails. So the first email goes out, and then 3 days later, they get an email saying, hey, just wanted to follow up on the previous email and let me know if there's any interest. And of course, you can add another follow-up for as many as you want. I generally recommend 1 to 2. Anything over that just really starts to annoy people. And then after we upload them to Pitchbox, we simply use our Google Sheets project management file to track the progress of these, to track the status of them. Again, when we're talking about doing 100 plus outreach emails, we want to make sure that we're staying on top of it. We're not contacting the same people. We're not sending the same pitch. We're not eroding our brand while doing cold outreach. And the key to that is organization. We have all of these files on our website, the blueprint.training, that you can check out. So after we send the pitch, it's just a matter of managing responses and scaling up or scaling down this effort. So managing the ongoing campaign requires a little more effort than traditional link building, than traditional outreach campaigns, because you have to coordinate with you or your client's calendar to schedule the podcast. You got to keep in mind also, it takes about an hour to record a podcast. So you need to be mindful of people's time when scheduling. So you want to make sure that you're not overly overloading someone's calendar to do podcast interviews when they've got a lot of shit to do for work. You got to make sure you're staggering that out. Even more important, though, to understand how podcast outreach fits into an overall promotional campaign. The method really works best for people with a brand, authority, or story. If you or your client don't have these, you should make podcast outreach a low priority. But vice versa, if you do have those, then it makes for an awesome outreach campaign. Me personally, I'm promoting my new training platform. I'm doing podcast outreach first because I've got a really cool story about how I sold a business. So I'm able to get on 3 to 5 podcasts a week, build these links, and also announce the launch of the course. It's just 2 birds with 1 stone. It's been a tremendous promotional outlet for us. So just a peek into our project management system. This is the project plan, and you can see how I have it broken down. Exactly what we just talked about. Alex is my link strategist. He's the one who builds the prospecting keywords. He writes the pitches. Aziz is our overseas prospector. She goes out and she finds 200 podcast opportunities. Then Alex goes back in, cleans them. Then David M is my outreach person. He pitches them. And then you can see how every month we're launching a new Pitchbox campaign to clean pitch, clean pitch, clean pitch. So we basically got 3 months of link building scheduled out right here. So I appreciate you guys tuning in and checking this out. I hope you got some value from it. If you want any of the templates, or if you want this as a step-by-step broken down training via short videos, go to theblueprint.training. This is all available via our link building module, which we are currently rebuilding. There's over 200 videos on outreach tactics in there, plus detailed trainings on how to use tools like Pitchbox, Google Sheets, and you'll also get access to all of our project management files. If you want me to just do this for you, you can hire my agency. You can go to ftf.agency, submit the contact form, and we can talk about how we can do all sorts of different outreach campaigns for you in your business to scale up your acquisition and PR efforts. I hope you guys enjoyed this. Please drop me a subscribe, like, comment, and I'll see you in the next video.